They say your home is where your story begins. But what happens when someone tries to steal your story? One forged signature, one fake rule at a time? I wasn't gone long. 12 days. Just a camping trip with my son. When I came back, there was a sold sign on my front lawn, and strangers moving into my house. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a mix-up. Then I saw her clipboard queen of the cul-de-sac smiling like she'd done me a favor. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was theft, disguised in community rules, backed by silence, and buried in paperwork. But they forgot one thing. I wasn't just a homeowner. I was the wrong man to mess with. Ben Harrow turned onto Sycamore Lane, just as the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the oak trees. The road was quiet, as always. It smelled like lawn clippings, pine, and suburban peace. He hadn't been gone long, 12 days, tops. A camping trip with his son, Kyle, off-grid. No phones, no noise. Just hiking boots, powdered eggs, and badly told ghost stories over firelight. And yet, when he pulled into the cul-de-sac, something was wrong. He hit the brakes. His driveway, had a big red sold sign planted dead center on the lawn. Not taped or leaned. Planted, as if it belonged there. Ben's stomach dropped. Maybe it was a mistake. A prank? God, he hoped it was a prank. Then he saw the truck. A U-Haul. Rear gate open. Two movers carrying a box labeled Kitchen Fragile right through his front door. His front door. His. Ben threw the car into park and climbed out, heart hammering in his ears. The porch still had the wind chime Julia bought from that weird street vendor in Sedona. The same scratch on the garage where Kyle scraped his bike. The same cactus pot they'd been meaning to replace for 2 summers. There was no mistake. This was his house. A man in board shorts and a sleeveless golf tee stood at the base of the porch, sipping from a green Stanley tumbler and scrolling his phone. He looked up as Ben approached, puzzled but unbothered. "Hey there," the man said casually. "Need something?" Ben's jaw tightened. "Yeah. I need to know why you're unloading a moving truck into my house." The man blinked, then chuckled nervously. You must be the previous owner." "No," Ben said flatly. "I'm the current owner. I never sold this house." The man's smile faltered. "That can't be right. We bought it last week. From the HOA. Ben's brain stalled. "The what?" "HOA, the man repeated. "You'd know better than me. They said it had been unoccupied for a while and it fell under default acquisition. Some policy thing." Ben took 2 steps back. His mouth went dry. There was no HOA on Sycamore Lane. There never had been. A woman appeared on the porch, clipboard in hand, wearing mirrored sunglasses and a crisp white blouse tied perfectly at the waist. She looked down, and her lips curled in a smirk. "Oh, Ben," she said like she was greeting a neighbor back from vacation. "Didn't think you'd be back so soon." His heart dropped. Sharon. Sharon Klein, the self-appointed community liaison and neighborhood gossip hub. If Ben had a nickel for every unsolicited email she sent about lawn decor violations or garbage bins left curbside, he'd own a second house by now. "What the hell did you do?" Ben demanded. Sharon descended the porch with the poise of a smug PTA president. "You left your home empty. Grass overgrown, mail piling up. It fit the definition of abandonment per Section 4.3 of the Neighborhood Continuity Charter." Ben stared at her like she'd sprouted horns. "There is no continuity charter. There's no HOA." Sharon gave a tight, condescending smile. "Not officially recognized yet, but we've been operating under advisory capacity for months. A majority of residents agreed to it." Ben felt his fists clenching. "I never did. You can't sell someone's house. That's real estate fraud." The vote passed, Sharon replied calmly. The bylaws were posted on the neighborhood site. "I was in Yosemite, off-grid." "Exactly," she said smugly. "Unreachable, unresponsive. We followed protocol." Ben's voice rose. What protocol? You made this up. From the side, the new homeowner, if that's what he was, interjected. Look, I don't want to get in the middle of anything, but we have paperwork, legal paperwork, deed transfer, title confirmation. It all went through escrow. Ben shook his head in disbelief. It can't have. There's no legal body to authorize it. Sharon doesn't have that kind of authority. The woman shrugged. We'll let the courts sort that out, I guess. Ben's world tilted. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash and being the one behind the wheel. And then it got worse. 2 police cruisers pulled around the bend. Ben's gut twisted. Sharon had called them. Of course she had. By the time the officer stepped out, she was waving them over like she'd just seen a shoplifter at Target. That's him, she said sweetly. He's causing a disturbance. Technically trespassing. Ben's voice cracked with rage. I live here. The officers looked between Sharon, the clipboard woman, and Ben. One of them asked for ID. Ben gave it. He watched as they took the deed transfer from the couple and flipped through it, frowning. This looks like a civil dispute, one said. We can't decide ownership right here. So you're telling me I have to sue to get my own house back? We're not saying that, sir. We're just saying it's not a criminal matter at the moment. Ben stared at his house, his front door, his son's bedroom window, his wife's garden, and realized with bone-deep clarity he was being robbed, legally, and no one was going to stop it but him. That night, Ben sat in his truck in his best friend's driveway, staring at the screen of his phone. He finally pressed call. The voice on the other end answered with a yawn. Didn't expect to hear from you. Ben didn't waste time. Reed, I need to bury someone in litigation. A pause, then a low laugh. Now this I gotta hear. Ben's eyes burned. Not from anger, from resolve. Someone stole my house, he said, and I'm about to take everything from them. Ben Harrow had seen scams before. He'd put white-collar criminals in prison for less. But this was something else entirely. By the time he sat down in Reed Morales' office the next morning, his world had been turned inside out. His hands still smelled faintly of pine sap from the camping trip. His boots still had Yosemite dust on them. But home? That was gone. Reed flipped through the documents like a wolf on a scent. He wore reading glasses now, something Ben hadn't seen since law school, but his mind was as sharp as ever. Every 5 seconds, he muttered something under his breath. Illegal transfer. No recorded HOA? Wait, what is this? Ben leaned forward. You see it too, right? Oh, I see it, Reed said, flipping to another page. Sharon filed a quitclaim deed on your property. No legal authority to do so. Not a licensed trustee. Not a court-appointed conservator. Just wrote her name and faked the structure behind it. He dropped the folder on the desk with a thud. She created a fake HOA and used it to steal your house. Ben exhaled through his nose. How? Reed stood, walked to a whiteboard, and started drawing lines between names and dates. Here's the thing. People trust authority. You call something a homeowners association, print some letterhead, and boom, people start mailing you checks. Ben nodded grimly. She's been collecting dues for a while. I ignored it. Thought it was annoying, not criminal. Well, it's both now. Reed circled a line item. This escrow agent? Fake. Address leads to a UPS drop box. The title company? Registered to a shell corp out of Nevada. Ben's stomach churned. So she didn't just take my house. She's been doing this to others? Reed turned, serious now. She's running a quiet scam in plain sight, targeting properties she thinks are vulnerable. People who travel, elderly, renters, military families, anyone who won't push back immediately. Ben's eyes narrowed. And I just gave her a reason to panic, Reed grinned. She picked the wrong damn guy. So, they spent the next 3 hours digging deeper. Ben logged into a private neighborhood Facebook group he'd previously ignored. Dozens of posts from residents aired minor complaints, grass violations, porch decor warnings, non-compliance penalties. Many of the posts referenced Sharon directly. Per HOA guidance. As discussed with Sharon. Subject to HOA review. The kicker? No one had ever voted for Sharon. There had been no formal election, no charter, no board. She'd just taken over, and the neighborhood had let her. It was a classic psychological play. Take something benign and official-sounding, wrap it in paperwork and confidence, and most people won't question a thing. She'd weaponized bureaucracy, one lawn at a time. Ben looked up at Reed. We need to hit this hard, loud. We don't just sue, we expose. Reed was already typing. We're filing a temporary restraining order today. Injunction to freeze the sale. Motion to nullify the deed. I'll reach out to the DA, but you need to start talking to your neighbors. Ben paused. You think they'll listen? Reed met his eyes. Once they realize they've been paying hundreds of dollars a year to a woman who made it all up, they'll be begging you to lead the charge. Ben stood. His muscles ached from days of hiking, but this was a different kind of mountain. You want war? He muttered to himself. Let's start knocking on doors. And just like that, the quiet man who'd once walked away from courtrooms picked up a folder of evidence, stepped into the sunlight, and declared a different kind of fight. Not just for his house, for the entire block. It started with a spreadsheet. Ben spent the next 2 days digging through every public record he could find. Land transfers, county filings, tax liens. Julia helped, her fingers flying across her old banking laptop like she'd never left the job. She was angry in a quiet way, measured, focused, like someone slicing through rope with a scalpel. They worked through the night, fueled by coffee and fury. What they discovered turned suspicion into certainty. Ben's wasn't the only house. 4 properties in their neighborhood, just within the last 14 months, had changed hands through similar transfers. All filed under the same HOA name, Cedar Valley Estates Homeowners Council. A name that didn't exist in any official registry. One of those homes belonged to an elderly veteran named Mr. Halverson. His wife had passed. He'd moved into a retirement facility just long enough for Sharon's HOA to declare the house abandoned. It was sold within 6 weeks. Another belonged to a divorced mother of 3. Her name was still listed on the utility account, but the deed had magically changed hands during a temporary relocation for work. No notice, no challenge. Ben stared at the screen. She's been targeting people who can't fight back. Julia nodded. And the county office just rubber-stamped it all. She submitted papers, paid the fees, wrapped it in official language. No one blinked. Ben stood up. I need to talk to Halverson. The veteran's retirement home sat 10 miles away, surrounded by quiet trees and sunlit benches. Halverson, now 82, looked thinner than Ben remembered, but the old man's voice still carried weight. They said it was for neighborhood safety, he said, voice rough with age. Said the house was deteriorating. Vandal-prone. I didn't want trouble. Figured I'd just let it go. Ben leaned forward. Did they ever offer to buy it legally? Halverson shook his head. No, it was gone before I knew it hit me. Ben's hands clenched on the table. Halverson looked him in the eye. If you're fighting her, son, don't stop. She's slick. People don't ask questions when you smile and use words like community upkeep. Back at home, Ben reviewed the deed trail for the house next door. Another red flag. The buyer listed Ravel Properties LLC. He ran a search. The company had purchased 3 other homes in nearby neighborhoods, all through similar HOA-based transfers, all signed by Sharon Klein. Reed confirmed it. Ravel Properties was a shell corporation. The registered agent was a law firm in Nevada that specialized in real estate holding patterns. She's not just inventing power, Reed said. She's funneling properties to flippers, probably taking a cut on the back end. Ben sat in stunned silence. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a box of old family documents. He wasn't sure what he was looking for until he found it. A faded title deed to a plot of land near the lake. It had belonged to Julia's mother years ago, sold under duress after a series of violations and aggressive liens from a now-defunct neighborhood board. The notary listed? S. Klein. Ben stared at it. Sharon hadn't just targeted neighbors. She'd been doing this for over a decade, and she'd done it to his family before. Julia appeared in the doorway behind him. Her voice was barely a whisper. She stole my mother's land. Ben stood, something inside him breaking and reforging at once. This isn't about a house anymore, he said quietly. She's been stealing homes, lives, legacies, piece by piece. He looked to Julia. And we're going to end it. The meeting wasn't supposed to be a big deal. Ben had hoped for maybe 10, 12 neighbors. A few people with questions, a few nods of sympathy. Enough to show Sharon she couldn't do this in silence anymore. Instead, over 40 people showed up. Folding chairs overflowed into the sidewalk. Someone brought donuts. Someone else brought a microphone. A teenager set up a small PA system from the back of his dad's pickup truck. By 6:30 p.m., the front lawn of the local Methodist church was packed. Ben stood at the front beside Julia, holding a binder full of county documents, forged HOA notices, and screen captures from real estate databases. He didn't raise his voice at first. He didn't need to. The weight of the truth did it for him. This is not a dispute over lawn height, he said calmly. This is a long-con one that's cost this neighborhood millions. A murmur rippled through the crowd. He flipped open the binder. These aren't just mistakes. They're forged deeds, fake notaries, and predatory property transfers done under the illusion of authority. Someone in the front, Ms. Diaz, who had lived in the neighborhood since 1987, raised a shaking hand. So, the letters I've been getting from Sharon, threatening me over my driveway planters? Ben nodded. Legally meaningless. Another neighbor stood. She charged me $400 for a tree permit last spring. Said it was for HOA compliance. Ben held up a photocopy. That check was deposited into a private bank account in her name. The crowd shifted from shocked to angry. Julia stepped forward. Her voice was steady. She took my mother's land 10 years ago. We didn't know how. Now we do. A hush fell. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then the whole lawn erupted. Across the street, behind the tinted window of a silver Mercedes, Sharon Klein watched the scene unfold. Her lips curled in a scowl as she lowered her sunglasses. She reached for her phone. No answer. She dialed again, her advisory board, the shell of residents she had convinced to lend legitimacy to her counsel. But they weren't picking up, not anymore. The crowd was growing, and control was slipping. Meanwhile, Reed worked behind the scenes. He filed a class action motion to consolidate claims against Sharon under a single civil case. At the same time, he submitted evidence to the state attorney general's office, flagging Sharon for real estate fraud, elder abuse, and wire fraud. He also issued a cease and desist to Revel Properties LLC, freezing their ability to resell any of the acquired homes. The neighborhood became a hornet's nest of momentum. One woman found Sharon's bylaws were plagiarized from an Arizona HOA website. A man discovered Sharon had charged him for dog noise violations on a property he'd never even owned. Within 72 hours, neighbors formed a watchdog committee. They canvassed the block, they posted signs. They showed up in groups anytime Sharon tried to enforce anything. Her power, once built on passive fear, began to collapse under active defiance. On Friday morning, Sharon marched down Sycamore Lane with a clipboard and a tight-lipped expression, trying to issue a citation to the Thompsons for unsanctioned Halloween decor, a 10-foot inflatable vampire with glowing eyes. When she approached, 4 neighbors calmly stood in her path. "Turn around, Sharon," said Ms. Diaz. Sharon hesitated. "You're not in charge anymore," said Mr. Patel, holding a copy of the cease and desist. "You never were," someone added. Sharon opened her mouth, closed it, turned, and walked away. That night, Ben sat on his porch with Kyle beside him. The boy leaned his head on Ben's shoulder. "Did we win?" Ben exhaled, slow and full. "Not yet. But we're not losing anymore." Kyle was quiet for a moment. "I miss the garden," he said. Ben looked at the house, still occupied by strangers, temporarily protected by legal orders, waiting for the court to rule. "We'll get it back." He didn't say maybe. He didn't say I hope. He said it like a promise. And Kyle, for the first time in days, smiled. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse lobby buzzed with reporters and murmurs from neighbors who had come not just to witness, but to testify. Ben arrived in a pressed gray jacket, holding a manila folder thicker than a textbook. Reed walked beside him, sipping coffee with the calm confidence of a man who'd already won. He just needed the court to catch up. Julia was already inside, sitting near the front with Kyle beside her, nervously bouncing his knee. This wasn't just a legal matter anymore. It was personal. It was legacy. The courtroom filled fast. And then Sharon arrived. She wore black, conservative, contrite. Her hair pulled back into a tight bun. The clipboard was gone, replaced by a trembling legal pad and an attorney she'd scraped together last minute. A man who looked like he specialized in traffic violations, not class action defense. She didn't meet Ben's eyes. She didn't meet anyone's. The judge entered. Gavel. Silence. Case number CV 42015. Harrow v. Klein. Reed rose first. Your Honor, we are here to argue not only property fraud, but a pattern of organized abuse involving identity misrepresentation, forged documentation, and exploitation of vulnerable homeowners under false legal authority. The judge flipped through the first few pages of evidence. His brow furrowed deeper with each turn. Ms. Klein, he said finally, looking over his glasses. You filed 22 deeds over a 2-year period, all signed by you under the title of HOA president. Yet your homeowners association has no registration, no tax ID, no public filing, and no documented voting structure. Sharon cleared her throat. We operated as a community-based initiative. Under whose authority? The judge asked. We had consensus, she stammered. The judge turned to Reed. Mr. Morales, did your team verify the tax implications of this alleged HOA? Reed nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Klein collected over $110,000 in dues, none of which were reported to the IRS. All funds were deposited into her personal account, or a secondary account registered under a shell LLC, with her as sole managing member. A gasp echoed from the crowd. Ben kept his eyes locked on Sharon. She was unraveling, but it wasn't over yet. Your Honor, Reed continued, flipping a page. We'd also like to submit new evidence found 2 days ago. This is a notary record dated 10 years prior, signed by Ms. Klein, used in the forced transfer of property belonging to Julia Harrow's mother, an action that preceded the creation of her current fraudulent HOA by nearly a decade. He paused. We believe this proves that Ms. Klein has not only committed fraud, but has done so systematically, over a significant span of time, and across multiple neighborhoods under different aliases. Sharon's attorney stood up in protest. Objection irrelevant past conduct. The judge held up a hand. Overruled. It shows intent, pattern, and long-term planning. He turned to Sharon. Ms. Klein, you are not just facing civil penalties here. Based on this evidence, I am referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution under California Penal Code 115, recording false documents. That's a felony. Do you understand? Sharon nodded faintly, her lips pale. The judge leaned forward, folding his hands. You played pretend with people's homes. You used bureaucracy like a weapon and fear like currency. Then his voice dropped a notch. And you did it for profit. He turned to Ben. Mr. Harrow, your property is to be immediately returned to your legal ownership. All claims made under the false HOA are declared null. Any persons currently occupying your home are given 5 business days to vacate. Furthermore, Ms. Klein is ordered to pay restitution, damages, and cover the legal fees of every member of the class action suit. Ben's shoulders relaxed, but his hands still clenched, just slightly. Justice felt good, but it wasn't finished yet. As the judge adjourned, the courtroom erupted into quiet celebration. Neighbors hugged. Ms. Diaz cried. Mr. Patel shook Ben's hand. But then, outside the courthouse, another surprise awaited them. A man in a dark suit approached Reed and Ben as they stepped onto the sidewalk. Detective Raines, he introduced. Financial Crimes Division. We've been watching Ms. Klein for months, but we couldn't get enough to stick. He held up the case file Reed had just submitted. Until now. Ben looked at the man. She's going to jail? Raines nodded. Not just her. Revell Properties, too. She was part of a laundering network. Your case opened the door. Ben felt Julia's hand slip into his. Kyle stood beside them, silent, listening. You didn't just stop her, the detective said. You exposed something far bigger. Ben didn't smile. Not yet. But he looked up at the sky blue clear, just like the day it all started, and finally allowed himself to exhale. Ben stood on the front porch of his house, exactly 46 days after it had been stolen. The wind chimes clinked lazily in the breeze. Same soft metallic sound Julia had always loved. The garden she once planted, now overgrown, still carried the stubborn scent of rosemary and sun-warmed soil. The porch swing creaked as Kyle leaned into it, legs too long now to fit the way they used to when he was little. But everything was where it should be. Home. Julia emerged from inside, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to Ben without a word. He took it, staring across the street at the now vacant house Sharon once lived in. Empty, windows dark. A foreclosure notice pinned to the door like a scarlet letter. Ben took a sip and let silence settle over the porch. Kyle broke it first. So, what happens to her now? Ben shrugged. She'll face trial. Maybe prison. Probably fines she'll never pay off. Kyle looked down. Do you feel better? Ben paused, watching a bird land on the fence. I don't know if better is the word. He looked around. At the porch. At his son. At Julia, who hadn't said much since the court ruling, processing everything in her quiet way. I feel right, he said finally. Like the scales balanced, even if nothing's perfect. They stayed like that for a while, until the sound of tires crunching gravel broke the stillness. A familiar car pulled into the driveway. Reed stepped out, holding an envelope. Morning, Harrow family, he called, walking up the steps. Thought I'd deliver this in person. Ben raised an eyebrow. What is it? More legal joy? Reed smirked. Better. Settlement check. Class action funds just cleared. It's not going to buy you a yacht, but it'll cover repairs, the missed mortgage, and... He tossed a glance at Kyle. Maybe a new bike for the young warrior here. Kyle beamed. Ben opened the envelope, staring at the figure. It was more than he expected. Less than what they'd lost. But somehow, enough. Reed leaned on the porch railing. Word on the street is, the city council wants to meet with you. They're thinking of proposing new ordinances, real oversight for neighborhood groups, fraud prevention protocols. You've made some noise, Harrow. Ben chuckled. I didn't want to make noise, I just wanted my house back. Well, Reed said, tipping his coffee cup like a toast. Sometimes justice echoes. Julia finally spoke. What about Revell Properties? Reed's expression darkened. Under federal investigation, Sharon rolled on them. Gave up internal communications. There's going to be a lot of sleepless nights in Nevada. Ben looked back toward Sharon's house. The irony wasn't lost on him. The woman who claimed to protect the neighborhood had tried to destroy it, and in doing so, had woken it up instead. That evening, the community came back to life. Ms. Diaz brought over tamales. The Thompsons inflated their vampire again, only this time, they added a cape and a cardboard sign. Still not HOA approved. People gathered, shared stories, laughed about their violation letters. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner. Others thanked Ben for being the one who finally did. It wasn't just a street anymore. It was a community. As the sun dipped below the trees, Kyle took out a small sign he'd painted with Julia's help. He hammered it into the dirt beside the front step. This house was fought for. Ben stood behind him, a hand on his shoulder, eyes stinging but not from the wind, because they hadn't just won back a house. They'd reclaimed something deeper. The right to stand your ground. The right to question false authority. The right to say, "Not today." And as the porch lights flickered on across Sycamore Lane, Ben Harrow knew the truth of what they'd done. They hadn't just defeated a fraud. They'd proved that one voice, loud, steady, and unwilling to break, was enough to turn silence into action. And home? Home was no longer something they defended. It was something they had defined.